um, what we experience as existence itself, how we experience ourselves existing, is the result of how we experience a particular vibratory rate of our consciousness. So, check this out. On the left here is a two-dimensional standing wave pattern. Now, what a standing wave is when subjected to a particular frequency, in this case, and if you watch the video, in this case it's like a sheet of metal or something, the vibration of that metal has parts in it where it's moving and parts where it's relatively at rest. Now, in the video, I think it's like salt or sugar or something, the designs form, or the salt goes to where those vibrations are relatively still, or the plate of metal is relatively still. So that means that depending on the frequency of the note or the vibration coming into the metal, that determines the design that the salt or the sugar or whatever it is makes. So this is also analogous to your own mind. Depending on the frequency or the vibratory rate at which you experience your own consciousness, it determines the reality that you experience, because you are walking in and within a holographic synthesis of all the sensory information that is being passed to you. So things look the way they are because the information that is being passed to you is being subjected to a certain vibratory rate, and that is the vibratory rate at which you experience your own consciousness. Now, if you look in the video, the standing wave pattern changes and gets more complicated as the frequency of the note that's being played through the speakers goes up. And actually, if it kept going up and up and up, it would reach a point where you were unable to hear it at all. And actually, the salt, or whatever it is in the video, would then be too big or too heavy and too dense and too coarse to actually respond in a way that we could see to that frequency. However, that frequency is still there and would still be having just as much of an impact. Now, it won't be having an impact on the salt itself because the salt is too dense and coarse, like I said. But in reality, and with your mind, the vibratory frequency does have an effect. It has an effect on the smallest, least dense things it can have effect on, i.e. what we call waves and particles of energy. So, although we are unable, normally anyway, to perceive or have the experience of that extremely subtle vibratory rate at which our consciousness is moving, it nevertheless shapes the way that we see our reality. Because depending on that vibratory rate, the images that we see change. So it's just like in the video. And on the right part of the slide, you can see these are actually the same concept, but done in 3 dimensions of liquid, and with something in the liquid that they could vibrate and see the patterns that form. So think about your mind being multi-dimensional energy or field. And the field itself behaves like liquid. Depending on the vibratory frequency that is acting upon that field, that changes the nature of the reality that you perceive, because this hologram that you are walking within is only appearing the way it does because of the influence that our own consciousness has on it. Now, the you, or the I, that we experience as who we are rests in the 0 point. And it rests in the 0 point because the I, or the you, the ultimate source of your awareness, is infinitely far away in terms of our ability to define its exact point. However, it is infinitely experienceable. And that is exactly what we do when we're in this process of enlightenment, which is awakening to a greater understanding and knowledge and experience of the reality of who and what we are. So we cannot define that I, or that you, or our experience of awareness, just the same way we cannot define the very substance, for lack of a better term, that makes up this reality. However, because we are it, we have the ability to experience its infiniteness. And the process of enlightenment is exactly that process. Opening up to an awareness, a greater awareness of the reality and who and what we are by, and we experience that by a change in our experience of this reality. That affects what we see, how we see reality, what we are able to perceive that is within this reality. That is why when you open up and cultivate your intuitive sense, you can pick up on stuff that is supposedly out of the normal range of what we think of as our five senses. We have far more senses than five. We normally think of taste, touch, sight, smell, hearing. But we have at least 7. The other 2 are our sense of time, and the last one is the intuitive sense. And the intuitive sense connects you to everything else. It is the right-brained ability to perceive what is beyond the left brain's definition of this reality. And everything I've just said has shown that the left brain, more intellectual definition of this reality is actually not, it's only good to a certain point. It does not have the ability to fully understand or describe this reality. So the right brain, experiential, intuitive part of who you are actually has the ability to know more about this reality than the left brain will ever have. The left brain, or the intellect, is actually meant to be in service of the right brain, or the intuition, because what you perceive through your intuition is brought into this lower vibratory realm called physicality by your intuition. So by your intellect. So the intellect gives form, shape, and it attempts to define what the intuition experiences. However, the intellect can never completely define those experiences. So think of everything that you see as a pattern in multidimensional energy. And how that pattern how that pattern is affected or influenced is by the vibratory rate of your consciousness. And you experience that vibratory rate in certain ways. So, in order to transcend the more mundane understanding of what this reality is, you have to cultivate that intuitive, right-brained, extrasensory sense. Because it is not actually extrasensory, it's part of our senses. It's just so dumbed down in many of us that we can't hear it. Picture your mind as like a big pond. And there are huge rocks being thrown in the pond by everything that is obvious to us. Whereas your intuitive sense is like a tiny pebble being thrown in that pond. So the big rocks, which are what is obvious, this physical experience, overpower the intuitive sense, or the information that's being passed to us through our intuition. And so that is why the discipline of meditation is so important. It helps you to quiet or bring to order all the noise that is in your subconscious, so that you can then be able to hear the information and the knowledge that is inherent and intrinsic in the vibration of your intuitive mind. And the more you are able to hear that, the more you are able to work with it, which means the more you are able to cultivate it and have it grow in terms of how much of your being that experience takes up.